Hello, and thank you for listening to Global Diversity News. From October 23rd to October 26th, I had the honor of covering the NMSDC Business Opportunity Exchange in conjunction with the MBDA's Minority Enterprise Week. On today's podcast, I speak with Alejandra Castillo, the National Director of the Minority Business Development Agency. We discuss how the MBDA is aiding minority businesses in technology and international trade. Hello, this is Jaymie White with Global Diversity News, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Alejandra Castillo with the Minority Business Development Agency. So please tell me a little bit about the MBDA as well as some of the things that are upcoming and what your goals are.
So Jaymie, thank you so much. This is very exciting for me. The Minority Business Development Agency is one of 12 agencies within the U.S. Department of Commerce. Okay. And some people may not know exactly what commerce does, but commerce is, I would say, touches everyone's lives.
Yeah.
From the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And commerce is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, so NOAA. You get your weather from the Department of Commerce. Actually,
I know that.
Yes, it's very interesting. So think about it. If you're in business and you're moving your shipment, your products, either through sea or through air, what's the most important factor? The weather, right?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
So, and commerce is also the Patent and Trademark Office. So when you're thinking of protecting your intellectual property, when you're inventing something, or your trademark, or you've designed something and you want to protect it from somebody else taking it or stealing it, you want to have a patent or a trademark. Okay. So that's the Department of Commerce. When you're thinking about international trade, exporting your products to the global marketplace where 95% of the world's consumers live. Yes. You want to go to the International Trade Administration, which is also the Department of Commerce, as well as the Economic Development Administration, which does a lot of investments around the country and communities to stir economic growth. And then you have MBDA among the 12, and I didn't mention them all, but MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, was created as part of Martin Luther King's argument that we needed civil rights, but we also needed economic opportunities. Okay. And the creation of MBDA is actually to stir the growth of minority-owned firms. Now, today, I would argue that MBDA becomes ever more important, because you see that the demographics are changing.
Absolutely.
So you're seeing the demographics are changing. And oh, by the way, the Census Bureau is part of commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to touch upon that, I think they just said a couple of years ago, it might have been, that minorities now are being born more than non-minorities. So like you just said, that is going to increase.
So the birth rate is growing, and we're seeing the changing face of America.
Yes,
and the demographics are undeniable. At the beginning, we thought it was 2045 when we were going to reach that tipping point of majority-minority. Now it's 2044, and it'll probably get even sooner. So what we're doing at MBDA today is very exciting, because we acknowledge, as the Secretary said today in the Power Breakfast at the National Minority Supplier Development Council, there are 3 big shifts. One is the changing demographics. 2 is the technological revolution that's happening,
and then innovation, everything. Yep.
Exactly, and you're very well versed in that area. But the 3rd one is globalization. So we need to look at those 3 and just figure out, how do minority businesses grow in size and scale, and how do we diversify so that we can respond to both domestic needs as well as global needs in the marketplace.
So with that being said, can you tell me a little bit more about how MBDA is solving those issues, particularly when it comes to technology and international trade?
So it's very exciting. First, MBDA has traditionally focused on 3 major things, which is access to capital, access to contracts, and access to markets. Okay. Now, we've launched our Inclusive Innovation Initiative, what we call I3.
Okay, I3.
Which is to be able to position minority businesses in the innovation and technology ecosystem. Okay. And one of the ways, among many, to do that is to partner with our national labs, our federal national labs. Now, many people may not know, but the federal government spends $140 billion in research and development in a variety of federal labs, whether it's the Department of Energy, NASA, National Institutes of Health, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture, CDC. These are all federal agencies that have research and development.
Okay.
Now, we have amazing scientists and investigators, but they're not necessarily entrepreneurs.
That's fair to say.
So that R&D at times can sit in the national labs, and these are remarkable discoveries, but there hasn't been a commercial application for it.
Interesting. Is MBDA doing something that will help that?
Correct.
Okay.
So through our Inclusive Innovation Initiative, we've partnered with the Federal Lab Consortium, which is the umbrella organization representing over 300 of national labs.
Okay.
We want to bring minority businesses into the national labs to be able to look at what is the R&D,
Interesting.
and through their very entrepreneurial spirit, try to find applications,
Creative ways to.
creative
Yeah,
ways,
use them in the
exactly,
commercial
to
space.
take that R&D and commercialize it.
Okay.
Now we need to partner with universities, primarily minority serving institution and historically black colleges and universities.
I'm actually a graduate of Morehouse.
There you go. So Morehouse would be perfect, because what we want to do is to be able to look at the R&D and then test it. We have to test it, build prototypes, figure out ways, get the capital, and then launch it.
Interesting.
We want to pair it with also capital, because you need money to do all of this.
Yep.
It's a holdup, but we need to get into that ecosystem.
I completely agree.
And then really be able to then, bring all these products to market. Now, on the international side, minority-owned firms are twice as likely to export because of linguistic and cultural ties. And we know that. And so we want to make sure that we are putting our MBEs and giving them the right technical assistance to be able to go to different countries around the world, whether it's in the continent of Africa or in the Western Hemisphere or in different parts of Asia or in Europe, in order to place our goods and services into the global marketplace. So there's a lot happening, and I invite your listeners to go to our website, MBDA.gov.
Definitely. So I have a question when it comes to that. First, I definitely have one when it comes to international trade. But for the tech side, I'm curious about the cities that you're targeting. Because when it comes to venture capital, as you know, the three big cities are Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. However, a lot of minorities live in other cities such as Atlanta, Miami, things of that nature. So is MBDA targeting specific cities in order to help flourish those communities?
We are targeting specific city, and we also want to draw the attention to these geographical areas where there's a lot of talent.
Yep.
You mentioned Atlanta.
Yes.
If you read the papers, you see that a lot of there's been a lot written up regarding Atlanta becoming the next Silicon Valley of the South of sort.
Yeah.
Detroit, there's a lot of great talent in Detroit of
From
people.
Detroit.
You're a Detroit native.
Yeah.
Miami, same there too. I was at the Blacks in Tech conference last year with the Knight Foundation and others.
Okay.
So there's a lot happening. Yes, Silicon Valley is by far the ecosystem that has been there, and it has a long, tradition.
History, yeah.
Obviously, a lot of people know each other. But, capital will always flow where there's opportunities. So we want to make sure that, one, we change the narrative, right? We're not just the traditional companies, but that minority businesses are moving into technology and innovation, and we have to change that narrative. Two, that we start to alert people in terms of these great companies and pair them up with new research and development and innovation. And three is, bring the capital to be partners in this effort.
Okay. So on to the international trade piece. What emerging markets, when it comes to minority and women-owned companies, should be targeting in the future?
So, President Obama, at the beginning of his term, said he wanted to double export. And as I said before, the data tells us that minority-owned firms, because of linguistic and cultural ties, as well as their understanding of business cultures, are much more able to export. So when you look at the map, the global map, you find areas that are truly ripe for growth, particularly those areas where the middle class is growing, where you're getting a new cohort of consumers that are buying different things, whether it's cars or or iPhones or different sorts of technology. And that's happening in various places around the world. For example, in Africa, 12 of the fastest growing economies are in Africa in terms of.
That's a good stat.
Yeah, it's a great stat. And Asia as well. Latin America, you look at a country like Colombia where 2 decades ago it was a very different situation. Now Colombia is at a peaceful stage. There's growth. They're investing in infrastructure. And like that, you can go around the world in different places. Now, what I will say is, before you think about exporting, make sure that you get information, that you get the right technical assistance and the right support. Because doing business in another country is not easy. And you need to make sure that you have all the information you need to understand, how do I enter into a contract? What's their commercial code? Who's going to pay you? When are they going to pay you? In what currency? Different technical aspects, but also leveraging Exim Bank, the Export-Import Bank, the International Trade Administration, all those government resources that are out there to really support American exporters.
Yep, so get your legal straight first and your documentation's in place before you kind of come to the MBDA or the government just in particular to export.
But we can help you get we can help them,
okay.
Absolutely. The International Trade Administration has a lot of market analysis. We work very closely with ITA as part of commerce as a whole. So we have that information. You don't need to buy it from a third party. It's information that's already available within the government. And you can go to Export.gov and find a lot of that market analysis as well.
Okay, so I have a question. When it comes to working with the government, I feel like there's a lot of, it's a strong word, but I also think it's true, intimidation. Because people see the government as, heavy with regulatory pieces, as well as just you have to have a lot of things in place in order to come to the government. Now I know it's all about trying to connect with businesses as simple as possible and as easy as possible, especially with technology, for example, which is high on that. So I'm just curious about some of the ways that MBDA is helping with that part.
Sure, I always like to turn the perspective, and some people feel like the government is at odds with business, but government and business work hand in hand. It's always best practice to have your financial records in order.
Yeah, of course.
It's good. It's good business practice. But I also want to encourage folks that when you leverage some of the government resources, they're really there to help you. We want as a government to have more businesses that are resilient, but more importantly, that are able to thrive. So it is in all of our collective best interest to empower and support more businesses, whether they're minority owned or non-minority owned. Now, because of the changing demographic, there's a compelling argument that we should focus on strengthening MBEs, minority business enterprises. And again, I would say reach out. These are services that are there. They're proven to work. And reach out to these different entities, whether it's the Small Business Administration, whether it's MBDA, or any other entity within the federal space that is there to help you.
Okay. So I know at lunch, a nice little stat was given out when it came to that 38.1%, I believe, in terms of the minority growth. Do you see that trajectory growing or even increasing? And if so, I know we've got programs in place. Does that also mean that the MBDA will be expanding to meet those requirements? Or
so that's a great stat, and that comes out of our survey of business owner. Between 2007 and 2012, minority businesses grew by 38%, and it's wonderful. But if you dig deeper into the data, yes, they grew in numbers. So you had more people opening up their businesses. What we now need to focus on is how do we help those businesses grow in size and scale.
Such the 10% that are in tech and trying to expand on that. Okay.
Because we know that if a minority business was able to create one additional more job, we would have 8 million new jobs, particularly in communities of color. So again, we make the argument it's in our collective best interest to support minority businesses because they are job creators. They are economic developers in many ways within communities that particularly need that type of economic injection.
Okay. So just a little bit about when it talks about education, and I know the government is doing a lot when it comes to connecting with private businesses, particularly in tech, that kind of boost that minority education. Is MBDA also included in that in terms of helping that particular portion?
So yes, remember I also mentioned the Economic Development Administration, which is part of Commerce. So EDA is making some very strategic investments in incubators and accelerators in communities around the country.
Yep.
Now, in addition, we kind of tag team as well, because we're now also working with minority youth entrepreneurs, which we define between the ages of 18 and 35. We're working very closely on STEM entrepreneurship, not just STEM education, but STEM entrepreneurship. How do we get more minorities to look into the different opportunities? The biomedical, precision medicine, big data, advanced manufacturing, advanced additives. These are the industries of tomorrow.
Okay.
So MBDA wants to not just work on the programs, but we work on the programs and the policies. The policies are important because we're in the federal space. Policy matters. How do we set the rules of engagement so that the policies are inclusive of minority populations and are driving that type of growth. So it's a very exciting time, but it's also a moment of great transition. And what we want to do is to alert MBEs that they need to incorporate more technology into their business models.
Okay. So with that being said, in terms of that legislation policy and trying to create more programs for minority-owned businesses, MBDA in 1 year from now, where do you hope we're at, just as a department? I mean, not necessarily everything else that's kind of going on.
I see the technology and the financial services space as really critical.
Right. Financial services?
Sure.
Because,
for example, access to capital.
Gotcha. Okay,
right?
I'm thinking like banks.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, okay. They can also be included. Yeah, okay. Yeah, keep going. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Yeah. So let me parse it out. We talked about technology. We need to drive more MBEs into more innovation and technology, but they can't do that unless they have the capital to do that.
I completely agree.
So these are the two bastions of areas that we really need to focus on. There's a lot of changes in the financial services industry. So we work not just with banks, but alternative capital.
I was just about to ask that.
Sure.
What type of alternative lending?
Alternative capital or alternative lending. That entire field is changing a lot because of financial technology, which very, very well democratize how capital is deployed.
Yeah, it may.
I hope so.
Yeah,
as we look down the future, I love to read as much as sci-fi, but also
what kind of sci-fi? We're talking Star Trek or Star Wars?
I grew up with Star Trek and Star Wars and everything like that.
My dad's a huge fan of Star Trek.
Yeah. But I love it because it pushes you to think what is 10, 15, 25 years down the line.
It's true.
And sometimes we focus so much on the today that we fail to see that what's coming on the horizon.
True.
And I invite minority businesses to take a minute from their daily lives and also pause and say, okay, what is coming down the horizon that I need to prepare for? And that's why the argument about technology and innovation is so critical, because what is coming on the horizon is the Internet of Things, right? How is the Internet of Things going to change the way we live, you work, play? What are the things we buy? How are all these devices going to be communicating? Privacy issues? There's so many issues that we need to be aware of. And for those of your listeners who may not know what the Internet of Things is, or the Internet of Everything, connectivity.
Yep.
But here's another wonderful tool. I follow a lot of different conversations on Twitter, and it helps me continue to be more abreast of what's happening. Precision medicine is huge. Wearable technology is huge. If you were to, set your Twitter account with any of these terms, you're going to get daily updates on what's happening. So, it's also being a student of life, being able to learn constantly, because that's what makes a good entrepreneur. What are people going to want to buy 5 years from now?
Okay.
You want to be at that cutting edge.
No, I completely agree. On that topic, do you have 3 innovative technologies that the MBDA is focused on specifically when you're targeting markets in order to grow for that?
So we're kind of industry like technology agnostic. We look at the entire plethora of what's happening, right?
When I say technology, because like we're talking about, technology is everything at this point.
Sure, exactly.
So sorry, I mean like to make it extremely broad in terms of what you're focusing on.
Sure.
Yep.
Well, we're kind of, or at least I'm looking at it from this perspective. When you have a concentration of minority businesses in particular areas, then it's upon us to look at the technologies that are impacting those industries. And I'll give you an example. We kind of over-index in construction.
Right.
A lot of minority businesses are in construction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we, as an agency, we want to talk about the different types of materials, discoveries in terms of new materials that are coming out
Yep.
in the construction industry, technologies that are making construction more efficient and more effective, energy, because
Okay.
if you're in
Yeah.
construction, you want to make sure that you are energy efficient. So helping that, we have a lot of companies that are in clothing, right?
Okay.
Garment,
Technology.
yeah. Wearable technology, making them aware of wearable technology. What does that mean? How do you incorporate that? We have a lot of companies in IT, but if they're not thinking about cybersecurity within their IT portfolio,
Yeah,
that's huge.
that's basic at this point. Yeah.
So to answer your question, when we look at the different industries in which minority businesses have traditionally played a role, our job is to say, hey, are you aware of these type of technologies that are going to impact your industry? And help them connect with that. Because at the end of the day, we just want to be kind of that entity that's looking at the horizon and really bringing in some awareness and really advocating for minority businesses to, instead of being at the back end, that we get to the front end of technology and innovation.
Okay. Back to, I know we're kind of bouncing around,
That's okay.
but back to that education piece. Are you trying to capture these potential entrepreneurs like right when they're in high school to kind of get them into that mindset, or maybe even at later stages of college or right when they're about to graduate? When are you trying to capture these?
So if
potential
you're
entrepreneurs?
asking me about the minority youth entrepreneurship,
Yep, in terms of like that STEM.
sure.
idea.
So minority youth entrepreneurs, we're looking at 18 to 35.
Mhm.
But you just said something slightly different. If we're looking at STEM entrepreneurship, STEM entrepreneurship is every age.
Okay.
Because you may have been in a business or in an industry, and now we need to incorporate some technologies to get you more up to speed. So it doesn't matter how long or how few of time. It's more the all-encompassing mentality that we have to now look at our business model
Yep.
and ensure that we have some sort of innovative and technologically driven product or service.
Yep. I love that answer because usually when you're dealing with, in my experience, minority, I guess, industries and whatnot, you kind of have to wait a certain time frame in order to honestly elevate your company or gain experience or whatnot, even if the technology is already sound. So the fact that you guys are just saying, hey, you've got the technology and it's working and it's beneficial for commercial use, for example. I love the fact that it's any age and we'll take anybody there. Do you have anything coming up in terms of events or programs that people can maybe participate in or know more about?
So, as you know, just to recognize, we're in MedWeek, Minority Enterprise Development
Yes.
Week, which is a presidential proclamation. So President Obama declared October 23rd through 29th as Minority Enterprise Development Week. So being here at the National Minority Supplier Development Council is a partnership to really recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of minority businesses throughout the country. And that, again, is something that the president has done. So we're very honored by that. In the coming months, we will have, under our Inclusive Innovation Initiative, our I3 initiative, we will have some activities. And I invite folks to go to our website and look at the upcoming events. We're always partnering with different organizations, supporting them. We have lots of webinars, They're also in our archive. So
Okay.
if you want to learn about how do I get a patent or how do I apply for a patent, we have webinars on that.
Okay.
And oh, by the way, here in Chicago, this Thursday, we have an Innovation in Action event, which will happen here in Chicago, October 27th, from 3 to 5, in collaboration with Blue 1647,
Okay.
which is a incubator here in Chicago. So go to our website, register, and it's going to be live streamed. So I really encourage folks to keep abreast of what's happening at MBDA. We do some amazing activities, but more importantly, we are a source of information and technical assistance.
Okay. So thank you so much for taking the time out.
This
I think
was
I
great.
said that like a ton of times, but just
No,
thank you.
this was fantastic. And
appreciate
anything,
that.
again, I invite folks to always seek out information. We are one of those resources. We're not the only resource, but we're pretty good. So if I may say so myself. But I'm delighted. I think these are
I'm
the type
patting her on the back.
no, these are the type of conversations that we need to have more of, and
agree.
changing the narrative.
I completely agree.
I want people to talk about minority communities not just as consumers. We are also innovators and entrepreneurs.
I completely agree.
So with that, thank you so much for this time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. And
Excellent.
I definitely agree with everything you just said. So thank
Good.
you, listeners. As always, check out the Minority Business Development Agency at MBDA.gov. Thank you, and have a great day.